So you're running for Congress, and you're you're running for Congress in a heavily uh, Republican area in Texas. In Texas, as a Democrat. So how is that?
It's been good so far. We've had a lot of support. So there are larger and larger amounts of Democratic clubs popping up, and to show their support. And I was saying, just the amount of people that want their life back to normalcy, whether it's gas prices, cost of living, health insurance. The way I always put it is every election, we've had this huge pendulum swing from one direction to the other in response to the previous administration. So when you have, an administration that comes in that's extreme left, the response becomes a equal shift to the right. So
Mm.
now I think we're in one of the most extreme shifts to the right. And the question is, can we keep that from snapping back too far to the left? Because a majority of the American people live in the middle. They just want their lives to function. They want their groceries to be affordable. They want their gas to be affordable. They want their health care to be affordable. But it's the ideology of the left and the far left and the far right that we keep seeing these extreme swings. And if we can tamp down that extreme shift from one side to the other and bring that pendulum back down to the middle where most people live, we can start to get the American people what they actually want and need.
So no, that's true because the pendulum always swings back. So no matter how far left or far right, I guess not necessarily politics, but also culture. No matter how far it swings to one side, it always comes back swinging the other way. So we saw a lot of that during Biden's administration, and it was okay. It wasn't the best, but it could have been much better. And a lot of people grew tired because it could be much better, and it seemed like that administration was not doing enough. Now Trump comes around, we give him a chance, and he just fucks everything up.
Yes, that is very true because he played to a base that was tired of, open border policies, things like that. And he really played up that base. And now what people fail to understand is that we have people like myself and people running for Senate like James Tallarico that believe you can you can have a middle ground. It's not one extreme or the other. You can have a secure border, but you can also have pathway to citizenship. So people fail to understand that because most heavy conservatives you talk to, they'll tell you that, oh, you guys just want open borders. No, that's not what we want. We want secure borders as well. There is a middle ground. It's not one extreme or the other. We can have border security, plus we can have legal pathways to immigration, and we can have law enforcement that enacts our laws without quite going to the extremes that people like Stephen Miller's agenda and Brandon Gill's agenda have just turned loose on the American people of ICE out of control. So there is a middle ground in there, and we have plenty of candidates out there that are looking to enforce that middle ground and show people that we can have the best of both worlds.
Something that I really like about you is that you are not afraid to be unpopular or to say something that is unpopular with a certain base. And I think that's exactly what we need, especially now, because we have politicians just trying to say whatever sounds good to a certain base. And it it kind of gets messed up when they say something and they just don't know how to defend those positions because they're just trying to test the waters to see what they say and to be very careful and not be very careful not to offend anyone. And especially when it comes to DIY and saying that you're against DIY, it makes it seem that,
DEI, yeah.
yeah, DIY.
I know
Maybe
what you meant.
that, maybe that too. But DEI, if you come around or if you come across and say that you're against DEI, it's uh, it's even hard to say that to a base that is for DEI, and you have to tell them like, slow down. Let's see what DEI is doing and get away from all the labels. Let's see if it's actually working because we know that there are certain demographics, and not necessarily ethnic demographics, but economic demographics, socioeconomic demographics that do have less access to uh, good education, and that impacts also the jobs that are afforded to them. And if we look at that, then we could figure out certain things. But if we just give everyone or lower the standards to give everyone the ability to every opportunity imaginable, you know, that's kind of hard.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been one to be deep into the political ideology of one group or the other. Like you said, people love labels, okay?
Mhm.
People love to label things. I get asked all the time, tell me what kind of Democrat you are. And sometimes I'll tell them I don't know how to answer that question. Are you a progressive Democrat, or especially with Mamdani being elected, are you a socialist Democrat? So the best answer I can give somebody is that I'm a pragmatic Democrat. I see a problem, I want it solved. How do we solve that problem? And how do we solve that
Mhm.
problem to give the people the most good? When it comes to DEI, I think that has been extremely blown out of proportion by the right as a way of shifting focus and blame onto other people to say, hey, there's this big problem here. Because a majority of the programs they're talking about say pilots that was famously brought up by Charlie Kirk. You know, if he saw a black pilot, he would be concerned. F- Flight instruction, flight schools, these things all have standard levels of education, flight time. So when you start saying, okay, that person was a DEI hire, it is a misnomer meant to play to the base of somebody's getting something they shouldn't, when that person most likely earned it the same way everyone else did.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, because when it came to Charlie Kirk and his statement, I know this has happened to me all the time that sometimes you say something and the delivery could have just been better. That's probably not what he meant, but it sucks when DEI is doing more of a disservice because now it seems that if you have uh, like employees anywhere on that fall under a certain demographic, that you're going to have people thinking now that they are DEI hires. So it just seems like it's doing more harm than good when we should be looking at merit because, growing up, that's basically what it was. If you wanted to get a, say, for a 4.0 in school, you needed to work hard. But now it seems like we're even lowering standards to schools that are not doing that well. And I mean, I live in Vegas here in the Clark County school system. I've heard it's like one of the worst in the country. So it's because if you have a group of people not doing that well, then you're going to lower the standards across the board. And when you lower the standards, you're going to have people getting into certain positions. And then in turn, you're going to make those people that actually earn the position seem like they're only there because the standards were lowered.
Yeah, it's going to give people that perception that that is what happened. Uh, the s- School boards, things like that, the state school levels, we've seen a lot of problems with that in Texas, and that's why I work with a lot of our Texas state candidates who are extremely passionate about school reform, and speak with them because they're more experts in the field of how do we fix school board or local education. Even my own daughter talks about, well, I don't think this school is providing me what I need. I want to move to a different school. Well, I'm sorry, huh? It's the state of Texas. You move from one school to the other, you're most likely going to find the same things. So at a fundamental level, we need to fix the overall school system. And right now, they have all the voucher systems that are trying to move people away from public school into private schools when we need to be focusing on fixing our public schools. I'm a product of public school. It's just actually fixing our public schools so that they're something where kids can get a quality education.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to public school as well, and I came from a community that was like the only way. So being in public school just seemed normal to me. And now growing older and having a lot of people saying that private schools are better, or having like this like preconceived notion against public schools is, pretty weird to me, to say, because from going into public school and getting what I needed, I mean, I got myself into college. I think that's good. But then you have some others going into Ivy Leagues. So now it's just like a challenge into seeing who is better, right? And you know, moving away from that, actually, there's another thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, because it seems now that Democrats are being seen in the bad light, and this is why Republicans won in the first place. And it seems like how everything is going and how Trump's just running his administration, that Democrats are going to come back into office. Uh, but it's just tiring seeing the pendulum swinging every 2 years. The Republicans come in and you see them not doing a good job, then you're going to have Democrats come in. Now, I know for a fact once Democrats come in, 2 years from then, we're probably going to vote Republicans in, because then you have this group saying, well, we're in, and now, they're not doing what they're supposed to. And then Republicans are going to come in. But like, what is one of the things that you're most passionate about, and you're going to work hard to actually get done? Because it seems that when we vote people in, they have all of these ideas, but nothing ever gets done.
So I'm a nurse practitioner that's specially trained in critical care and trauma. So I've been doing that for almost 20 years, and seeing how our healthcare system has been severely broken for a long time, especially when compared to other countries. Healthcare reform has been my major focus in my campaign. I've taken time to write out bills that are ready to go on day one when I get elected, on how to start transferring us to a better healthcare system that's less expensive for the country, less expensive for the uh, um, average American. And these are things that can be done to give us better healthcare, cheaper healthcare, because the United States has one of the most expensive healthcare systems, but we offer some of the worst healthcare in the world. So when we compare ourselves to other first world countries like Canada, European Union, the UK, we are falling greatly behind. And some of the choices of the current administration has made that even harder for for the American people, especially with the healthcare subsidies that have been done away with. That's significantly increased the price of healthcare, and the ripple effect of that has come into place is felt almost immediately. So the way my current job works as a nurse practitioner, I work in a hospital. I cover all the ICUs in that hospital. I stay there from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I do that for 7 days in a row, and then I'm off for 7 days in a row. I have a doctor that's there during the day, and I cover at night. And almost immediately, when funding was cut to Medicaid and Medicare, you started seeing rural hospitals in my region that could no longer pay for specialists like cardiologists, nephrologists, urologists. So either those rural hospitals were closed completely and you had hospital deserts where somebody has a heart attack and it's now an hour and a half ride for them to get somewhere to get some kind of emergent health care, all the way up to the point where that hospital's still there, but when they get there, there's no cardiologist available, so they have to be put on a helicopter and flown to me at a hospital that's in an urban area. So that is an extreme delay in care that is caused by these cuts, and hospitals just can't afford to pay to have a specialist on retainer. So they're sent to the urban hospitals outside the rural area. That's time delayed in care to that person, but it also overwhelms the urban hospital. So whenever I work in a hospital with 30 ICU beds. I cover actually, I'm sorry, 42 ICU beds that I cover all those ICUs at night. And you are constantly getting patients that are transferred from rural hospitals. Your hospital rapidly becomes at max capacity and you have no place to put those patients. So then it becomes a transfer center's job to scramble to find a hospital that has an open ICU bed. I've had people flown in from Norman, Oklahoma,
Oh yeah.
because there was no ICU bed closer to them.
Wow.
So if you're talking someone having a massive stroke or a massive heart attack and time is of the essence to get them care, you've now messed around and got yourself outside the window of optimal treatment. So when they're making these cuts, this is the real world impact of it.
So working in ICU, like what is one of the most common injuries that you come across?
So I originally started my career working in trauma. So I did that for the first 10 years of my career, and then moved to a hospital where I focus on critical care. But when I did work in trauma, it was victims of violent crimes, motor vehicle collisions, falls, domestic abuse, family violence, sexual assault, you name it, we saw it. So you see what happens when law enforcement isn't taken care of, and that is another big problem on my platform is when they've taken so much money away from local law enforcement and given it to organizations like the Department of Homeland Security, and then neglect what local law enforcement gets, then we're not able to take care of those trauma victims or prevent the trauma from even happening in the first place. For the last 7 years, I moved into critical care. So I haven't done trauma in about the last 7 or 8 years, but I predominantly do critical care. So you see people, I cover a medical ICU, a neurological ICU, and a cardiovascular ICU. And so, you see people with severe infections, you see people with strokes, you see people with heart attacks. So what I have seen a significant increase in the last couple of months is patients that are coming in their late 30s, early 40s that have had significant strokes. Um, and so usually the way the process works is I'm up in the ICU, the emergency room doctor calls me down, says, "Hey, I've got a patient that needs to be admitted to the ICU. They're down here in such and such room in the emergency room. If you want to come see them, work them up, see what you can do for them." I go down, I see somebody that's 42 years old who's younger than I am, and he's had a massive stroke. You ask him, hey, what's your medical history? He tells me I've got high blood pressure. You ask him, what medication are you taking for that? Well, I haven't taken medication in 3 months. Why haven't you taken your medication in the last 3 months? Well, I can't afford it. So
Mhm.
the price of medication, which was simple preventative care, caused this person to have a massive stroke at the age of 40 that's now going to be a lifelong debility. So because we've moved so far away from what people can afford for preventative care, we have now caused detriment that's down the line. A simple doctor's appointment and reasonably priced medications could have saved that person from a lifetime of either physical therapy for years versus he can't move the whole left side of his body for the rest of his life. And that's someone 40 years old.
Mhm.
So you've got a good 20, 30 years ahead of you of your entire left side of your body being paralyzed. That's not okay. Whenever a prescription of blood pressure medication could have prevented that.
Yeah, what I try to tell people is to just eat better when they're young and they're capable of, because also that has a lot to do with one's health. And I'm sure that you see this a lot, but someone that is 30 to 40 years old having a heart attack or a stroke is not necessarily normal. It it
You have
almost,
you have some you have some genetic components that play
yeah.
into it that because I mean some of these people I've seen are some of the most physically fit people you could imagine. I mean, they go to the gym, they eat properly, and some genetic predisposition to high blood pressure or just, the diet we have available in America. But, you see a guy that you would normally see at the gym bench pressing 300 pounds. I mean, the guy looks great. And he's there with a stroke. You typically think your typical overweight, obese patient, he's like, oh, well, you ate like crap your entire life. Yeah, you've got high blood pressure. But whenever you see some of these guys and it's like, man, you're in much better shape than I am. How did you have blood pressure your entire life? Sometimes it's genetics that you just can't escape.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
no, that's true. That's sometimes it happens with genetics, and you can't really get away from that. Uh, but I do see the good thing that I see now is that a lot of more people are taking control of their own health and their own fitness and their own diet. Because even if your goal is not to be fit or be the most fit person around, also just eating better, like eating whole foods and avoiding a lot of ultra processed foods, because a lot of those chemicals, it just can't be good for you.
no, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right there. So that was an issue that I think Secretary Kennedy kind of wavered on whenever it came to being the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Was yes, people, especially moms, they latched onto his message of healthier foods for kids in schools, things like that. And then he also at the same time leaned into his anti-vax movement.
Mhm.
So as someone that was a frontline healthcare worker during the COVID pandemic, working in the ICU where you saw the worst cases of COVID and you see what happens whenever we had a significant improvement in the situation after the COVID vaccine came out, you understand the importance of vaccinations and things like that. So whenever you have a secretary of health that is saying, okay, yes, you've got a positive message that says better food for children, better get rid of these dyes, get rid of these additives. Cool, that's great. But he kind of went a little far in the other direction as well. And if he had listened to appropriate research on some of those issues, we may not be having some of the problems we're having now with that
Mhm.
administration.
Yeah, and that's also another thing that we need to be very careful about, and especially just being careful about certain positions, because there are certain things that are good and then certain things that are bad. And that's kind of the mess that we are in right now, because I supported Trump in this past election. And he came in, and we know that he didn't do like anything that he even campaigned for. The people that voted for him were voting for him because of the platform that he was representing and that he was pushing. He said that he didn't want to start any new wars. Then he went and bombed Iran, and
Yes.
like countless of things, right? And this is one of the positions that I support Kennedy on when it comes to diet. And supporting one person does not mean that you have to support every single position. It's like if someone votes for you, they don't
Hmm.
support, or they may not support every single position, agree with you on every single thing that you believe, even out of like, say if you if you're a fan of a certain sports a team, does not
Hmm.
mean that voting for you is also going to make me a fan of that sports team, for
Right.
example, right?
Yeah.
And
If the
yeah.
Democratic Party's your team, I don't like this particular player. And I don't expect people to like, every player on the team or agree with every opinion that I have. But what we are extremely lacking in, sorry about that. Uh, so what we are extremely lacking right now, especially in Congressional District 26, is a representative that actually listens to the people. So we have currently Congressman Brandon Gill, who has taken his main platform that he is focused on is Stephen Miller's plan of massed ICE agents, deport them all, get rid of everybody, extreme immigration control, but has done nothing to address any other concerns of his constituents. I have I'm just the candidate running right now, and I have people that reach out to me all the time that say, "Hey, I can't get a hold of my representative. How can you help me?" And that makes me sad that, I'm trying to field calls that our current representative should be taking, especially from families of veterans that say, my son is over in the Middle East right now, and he was injured in one of the attacks, and I don't know what to do to help him, and I can't get a hold of my representative. I get some secretary that tells me they'll call back, but is there a way you can help me? And I talk to these people and I try to navigate the system to where we can actually get a hold of his office or a hold of one of our senators so that we can make the people we are supposed to be representing heard. That is the whole thing. I'm running to be a representative of the people. I need to hear from the people. And when you have a congressman that doesn't want to hear from the people, that's a real problem.
Yeah, and one of the arguments that I hear a lot about is an argument on immigration. And that's okay if you want to have that be part of your proposal, but or your platform. But having that basically be the only thing makes me not really believe you, because it seems like you're just pushing a narrative. And even, let's use him for as an example. Even if he's running as that as being his platform, it makes me believe that he doesn't really care about pushing for that and be more of a self-invested, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. And we can't have that either. It just seems in Congress, there's a lot of people that have their own personal investments in being in office rather than pushing any of the policies. Because at the end of the day, there are people like real Americans that do want to have tighter borders and more border control and are more anti illegal immigration. But
Oh,
then you have a representative that is telling you that he's for that, but he isn't.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you have representatives that only hit on these certain talking points that come from the grander party scheme, then they're missing the big picture of what is it that the people in your district that you're supposed to be representing actually need. So I equate it to, we are at this point where, enough with the politicians, we need to bring back statesmen, people that are not influenced by big money donors. They're not influenced by, I have to be doing this, saying this just because the party told me to. It's listening to what the people in your district are saying that you're supposed to be representing and finding out what's going to make their lives better. And that is what I've tried to do. I've tried to go out, listen to everybody I possibly can to see what is it that is important to them and what was important to me whenever I decided to run for office, and see where we can come together to make some real solutions. And you run across a lot of people with a lot of questions, and no one man is going to have the answer to every single one of these questions. That's why we have a Congress built up of 435 representatives. So when you have an approach of the current Congress that is, Republican led and only wanting to please one person rather than the nation, you're not you're not getting people to the point they need. So we need to kind of back things up a little bit to the point where we can actually represent our community, and not a party, not a single politician or not a single leader, but actually figure out what we need to do to facilitate change in our system that's going to improve the lives of everyone.
Mhm. Especially living in Texas, because running for Congress in Texas is different than if you were running for Congress in a liberal district in California. So if there are certain needs that your district needs, or that they want, it's very important to listen to those needs, and this is what makes a good representative from a bad representative. Because if even if your own district wants something to get done and you're against that, but it's what's popular in the district, I mean, that's one of the things that you need to take into consideration, and seeing a way to work it out. Because because even being a Democrat, uh, it's almost like a curse word saying being, certain things and being against immigration, right? uh, but if it's something that your district wants, you'd have to sit down and say, okay, so how do I bring my idea into making those that are here illegally feel safe? Because whether you like it or not, they're already here and they are still constituents, even though they're not allowed to vote. That they are part of the community. They make up the community. So how do I keep them safe while still pushing against illegal immigration? Because you cannot just say that illegal immigration is not an issue when we're seeing it happening, but it just seems like the media is making it seem like it's worse than it actually is. But it doesn't take away from the fact that those that feel that they're not safe uh, want this issue to be pushed as well. So, like, is that something that you're willing to do? Like, how do you come across that? Like, how do you come into conflicting ideas? Because being a Democrat running in a Republican district, it's hard because you have a lot of people that I'm sure that they're pro guns, and being in part of a party that is notoriously against guns, and on top of that, so many other issues. Like, how do you even navigate that?
So one of the best examples I use is whenever I'm at work and you have a patient that's crashing in front of you, and you bring in all the specialists to look at the patient, and they bring me in as the critical care provider. When we discuss how to fix this problem of a patient that's crashing, nobody asks what your political motivation is. Nobody asks, what your opinion is on LGBTQ. Nobody asks your opinion on what guns are. You look at the problem and you work together and you solve the problem. And that is my hope once we get elected, is that we can look at problems together and work on how to solve these problems without turning them into partisan fights. That is also a huge that you brought up, the guns and things like that. That is also a huge point of contention, because Republican Party wants you to believe that Democrats are going to come in and take all your guns. No, I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed carry license. I carry most places I go. I believe in our Second Amendment rights. I believe that we should have gun safety laws that help prevent gun violence that we've seen in America. But I'm not anti-gun. But the news media and things like that, they want to spin it in a way that says, man, you elect this guy, he wants to come in and take your guns. And that's just not the case. What you want is to be able to in put in place laws that are things like universal background checks, red flag laws. You want to close the gun show loophole, because yeah, you said you were in Las Vegas, right?
Right.
I don't know if you guys have something similar to what we have in Texas, where we have what's called the gun show loophole,
I think we
where
do.
yeah, you can go to a gun show and say somebody's walking around the gun show, and everybody's got their tables for businesses that they're selling things, and if you go up to one of the tables and buy a firearm from them, they'll run a background check on you. But if you're walking around the gun show and say I walk in there and I want to get rid of one of my handguns, I just walk around with a sign that says, hey, I've got a Glock 23 I want to sell, then somebody will walk up to you and say, "Hey, how much are you selling that for?" You'll say a couple $100s, and they'll be like, "All right, here's $400 cash. You trade it. There's no background check." That's a major loophole in a way that felons that aren't allowed to have firearms are able to get a hold of firearms. If you're able to close that gun show loophole and make it to where people aren't just making side deals and passing around firearms, then and a background check is actually done, then you're helping close a major loophole in how felons are acquiring guns. I'm not saying people can't have guns, but there's ways to make it safer to where the wrong people that shouldn't be having firearms are getting them.
Like, that just seems crazy to me because as a gun owner, you would want to have a gun to keep your family safe, right? Especially if someone tries to break into your house. But why would you support something that makes the bad guys easier to access weapons?
Yeah, it's a crazy system, because not only do I want firearms for my own personal protection, I used to do a lot of competitive shooting. So when they're talking about certain types of firearms they want to get rid of, I understand how they come into play for what I was using them for competitive shooting competitions. But whenever you're talking, so whenever it comes up with assault rifle ban question comes up, no, I mean, I get what some people want them for, and I used them for years for competition. But when you're talking about these things become easily accessible through these loopholes, no, we've got to close those loopholes so the wrong people aren't getting their hands on them.
So if I were a felon and I was planning, say, to kill someone, I could just go to one of these gun shows, get a gun, and then drive to someone's house and shoot them. Basically,
Hmm.
that's literally what could happen, right?
Yep, that's the way that loophole works in Texas. Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't even know
Or
why.
say or say you were the felon that committed a crime with a firearm, then you take that firearm, go to a a gun show, sell that firearm. Now that firearm is now put into circulation far away from you until it's found out later on down the line, could go through three, four different people before somebody, law
Wow.
enforcement gets a hold of it and says, hey, this firearm was used in a commission of a crime. Where did you get it from? I don't know. I bought it from some guy at a gun show. Well, what was his name? I have no idea.
So I could literally go as a fan into a gun show, buy a gun, go commit a crime, come back to that gun show because I'm sure that it'll still be there, sell that gun, and just wipe my hands clean off of that gun.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is crazy. I don't even know why that would be something anyone would want to support.
Yeah, that's been a major contention in the state of Texas my entire life. So you have your NRA people and you have your organizations that say, don't take away these rights. You're infringing on our rights. But these are simple fixes that could dramatically increase people's safety on how illegal firearms are changing hands.
And so another thing is you have a lot of people that being against or being for the Second Amendment, but then when it comes to the 19th Amendment, which I'm sure that's the amendment that if you're born here, you are legally allowed to have citizenship, right? Or was that the 19th
Birthright
Amendment?
citizenship. Yeah. You talk about birthright
The
citizenship.
birthright citizenship. I don't know if that was the 19th Amendment or that
19th is
the women's right to
women's
vote.
voting. Uh, let me see. You're catch me in a civics test here.
Yeah, because it's one of those amendments. I just don't.
Yeah, 19th was the women's
Women's
right
right
to
to
vote.
vote.
I believe 14th is
The
the one you're
14th
talking about.
Amendment. There you go. I mean, looks like a nine to me. Uh, uh, so, okay, so you could, if you're for the Second Amendment, and but then you turn around and say, actually, that's not what the 14th Amendment meant. Like, so it's like it's you're just using the Constitution to meet your own, uh, like your own like, right?
Mhm. So people argue both ways that the 14th Amendment was put in place to um, give
Slave,
people that were slaves
yeah.
citizenship post Civil War and post Reconstruction, so, but the language of it is not worded that way. It's if you're born here, then you're an American citizen, is the gist of the way the 14th Amendment is worded. So it's it becomes was somebody here illegally? Okay, say someone's mother comes here illegally, she's pregnant, she has a child, is that child at fault for where they were born and should be shipped away somewhere? I don't think so. So it all comes down to your understanding of the language of the law, and I believe that if someone was born here, that makes them an American citizen. Now, when you start compounding, what do you do with these children if you get rid of the parent because the parent was here illegally? Should it be a idea of we find some kind of pathway to citizenship versus deportation? Then the DACA rules come into apply. So it compounds one on top of the other. So you have people that are on the extreme end of the spectrum, like Brandon Gill, that says, no pathway to amnesty, no no way to come here and pathway to citizenship. But it becomes a strange irony that his own father-in-law was an Indian immigrant, and so therefore his daughter was born here and became an American citizen that way. So he's saying basically his own wife should not be here based on being the daughter of an immigrant. So where do you draw that line? And it becomes very confusing whenever he's saying, okay, what's right for my family is not right for somebody else's family, or the fact that he constantly rails against Somali immigrants or Haitian immigrants, that especially he's had a lot of negative things to say about Somali immigrants in Minnesota, that he says these are immigrants accused of fraud and they should be all thrown out of the country. Well, his own father-in-law was Dinesh D'Souza, who was an immigrant from India, who was pled guilty and convicted of campaign finance fraud, later pardoned by President Trump. But if you're saying everybody that's an immigrant that committed fraud should be thrown out of the country, is his own father-in-law not somebody that was an immigrant that was convicted of fraud that should be thrown out of the country? Doesn't make sense, right?
I mean, it would make sense if they actually believe everything that they said, but it just seems like a lot of politicians don't believe anything they say, and they just say whatever sounds good and
Yeah.
whatever helps them
It's
get elected.
it's yeah, it's who is the person? How much money do they have? Right now, the big topic has been green cards versus this gold card that they're offering. So they're saying, okay, we want no amnesty, no pathway to citizenship, but you can get this gold card if you pay $1 million. We'll let you immigrate here. So you're putting a price tag on citizenship rather than the normal pathways to citizenships that we've had since the founding of our country. Whenever you said, "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free," now you're saying, "Okay, we don't want those people. We want, if you can afford $1 million, we'll let you in." It's it's very contradictory. It's saying, no, the average immigrant looking for the American dream is not okay, but if somebody's willing to pay me $1 million, okay, cool, let them in.
Yeah. And it also seems that immigrants, especially, are hard workers. And if we have a vetting process to let the hard workers in, I mean, it could make the U.S. even a strong, more stronger country than we are,
Oh
because
yeah, I mean the immigrant community has propped up our Social Security system for many, many years because they're paying into Social Security, they're paying into taxes, but they're not getting the benefits of those things. So they're actually been the major source of keeping Social Security alive for as long as it's been. While I've also written legislation that I hope to get in once elected that helps to fund Social Security for now until the end of time. But what you have to do in that case is you actually have to get the super wealthy to pay their fair share, because the way the system works now is that they cap out at a certain amount of money. So where you and I are paying on our taxes a certain amount of money into Social Security on every paycheck, for the super rich, once they hit a certain cap, say they hit it in January, they're not paying into Social Security anymore. They're not paying a percentage of their paycheck like you and me are anymore. They're done in January. Now, if they still had to pay the certain amount of their income for the entire year, you're adding billions of dollars to Social Security, and then now it's funded.
yeah. And I mean, I don't even know what we're really going to do, because it seems like we're so divided on every single issue. And if you vote for either a Republican or a Democrat, you support everything a Democrat or a Republican does, and that's not really the case. And I think that is making it hard for us to come closer and to actually sit down and see what we agree on and what we disagree on. Because as someone who has voted Democrat and Republican, I can tell you that there are good things or things that sound good from both sides, and it's not always just black and white.
It's not.
And being
I
able to
mean,
sit down and talk about issues could allow us to come to an understanding on like what's the best solution.
yeah, it's that becomes a major sticking point whenever you're talking to someone from one side or the other, is somebody wants to talk about this black and white situation of most things when there is a massive gray area in between that you need to be working on most topics. I've had conversations with people since we talked about the Second Amendment. I've had people that have reached out to me and say, "Are you for or against the Second Amendment?" And I said, "Well, that's a whole gray area to say whether I'm for or against the Second Amendment." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. It's you either for it or you're not." And you kind of have to have this dialogue of, well, there's a lot in between yes and no. So where can we fix work in the gray area to find a solution to the problem? Where can we work in this gray area to find solutions to Social Security, to healthcare, to the border? Because people want to tell you, okay, you elect Democrats, you're going to open the border wide open and go back to the Biden administration. No, that's not what we want. That is
Mhm.
not even close to what we want. But that's what one side versus the other is going to say, is it's an either an open border or it's a closed border. No,
Mhm.
there's a massive gray area in between.
Yeah, it's something like that. And something like the question, are you for or against the Second Amendment? It's very nuanced because what they're basically saying or asking is, are you for your interpretation of the Second Amendment or are you for my interpretation of the Second Amendment? Because being against any amendment, I mean, that's as un American as you could be because the amendments are there for the protection of the people, right? But it's how we interpret them what matters.
Correct. I mean, you go down to, let's start with the First Amendment. I mean, I've had people come up to me and say, "Do you believe that this nation was founded as a Christian nation because the founding fathers were Christian, and that's what they meant by freedom of religion?" And you kind of have to say, no, I don't think that's what they meant by freedom of religion. I don't think they founded it as a Christian nation. I think they worked very hard when they wrote the Constitution to leave religion out of it and to say there is a freedom of religion. And the last argument I got was someone came up to me at an event and told me, well, I mean, they were talking about Catholics versus Protestants, and that's what they meant by freedom of religion. You can choose between those two. Will you talk more to that person and say, okay, well, are you Catholic or Protestant? And they say, well, no, I'm Baptist. Okay, so then by your interpretation of saying they had in mind Catholic versus Protestant, does Baptist fall into one of those two categories? And is your religion now not what they meant? How
Mhm.
do you interpret that? I think they saw the issues that they had with the Catholics and Protestants and came to the conclusion of, hey, there will be other religions that pop up, and we don't want to see these same problems pop up again. So we will say, you are free to practice religion in whatever manner you see fit. And I'm a big proponent of whatever God you believe in, you should have the right to worship that God
Mhm.
without fear of violence, without fear of government interference. You have that freedom of religion. That's how I view that amendment. Is you have the freedom to practice your religion the way you want to practice your religion.
Or not practice a religion at all.
At all. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. If you don't want to practice religion at all versus you're Christian, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, what however, you're entitled to your religion and your faith and whatever God brings you comfort.
Mhm. Yeah, and especially being in Texas because isn't Texas in the middle of trying to get schools to have the Ten Commandments up?
Yes, and they have successfully done that in many schools, and there's many lawsuits from many different school districts that are fighting that right now, and some of them are winning, some of them are losing. It's it becomes the question of how does that make the Jewish student in that classroom feel? How does that make the Muslim student in that classroom feel? How does that make the atheist student in that classroom feel when you've got one particular religion's commandments up on the wall, when perhaps that real estate on the wall would be better served by having the Bill of Rights put on it.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, and I like to think back to when I was in first grade and having to pledge allegiance to the United States of America, not knowing
mhm.
damn well like what even the word allegiance was. And looking back
Right.
at it now, I'm like, that's kind of scary because you have someone, especially kids, saying certain things, not really understanding the full concept of what they're saying, and just standing there saying, "I pledge allegiance to the United States of America," in a synchronous way with your entire class. I mean,
Yeah, you have a
right?
lot of special interest groups that are saying, we want kids to learn this way or say these things, or we want to, especially a big problem in Texas, we want to change the curriculum to, you know, say slavery wasn't that bad. Rather than they want to wash history to be in a better light. Now children are impressionable. They're going to learn what they were taught in school. I mean, I still remember some of most of the things I was taught whenever I was a kid, and those things stick with you until you become an adult and you do research on your own and figure out, okay, that's not what things actually were. And but if someone doesn't go on to higher education or something like that, they're like, oh, I was taught in school that pledge allegiance to the flag, the Ten Commandments are on the wall, this is what I'm supposed to believe. It's grooming a nation to think the way you want them to think rather than have them be free thinkers.
Mhm. Yeah, and it gets, I mean, scary, especially when it comes to promoting LGBT in schools. And it's not necessarily promoting the tolerance of LGBT, but promoting LGBT as a way to live. And that's another thing that we're getting around on. It's like a lot of political issues just being influenced into schools, and schools should just be a place of learning and not really of having these ideologies presented to kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's been an especially big problem in Texas, and the Texas House of Representatives arguing for bills on anti-LGBTQ movements that try to demonize them, or we want to have conversations about who can use what bathroom. You're taking a population that is one less than 1% of the population and trying to make them the bad guy that everybody needs to focus on and saying these are where all the problems come from. LGBTQ, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, these are just people trying to live their lives that deserve the rights of everybody else. Now, when you start trying to make them as the focal point of your agenda to say they're the ones that are causing the problems, they're not. I mean, they're just people like you and me that are trying to live their lives the best they can. It goes back to the same thing with religion. Worship who you want to worship, love who you want to love. That is your life, and government should not be involved in telling you who you can worship, who you can love, who you can be as an individual.
Mhm. Yeah, because it really comes down to that. Just do what makes you happy and don't tell others to do what is going to make you happy, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't need the government peeking in my bedroom window seeing how I like to live my life.
Hmm.
That's none of their business. And it's also a question I get asked a lot as a healthcare provider about gender affirming care and things like that, how government should be involved in that. No, these are conversations that are had between a patient and their healthcare provider, not with the government peeking in. So whether someone is uh, having gender reassignment surgery, hormone therapy, whatever it is, that is a conversation between your healthcare provider and the patient and their
Right.
family and whoever else they want to be involved. If it, they want to have their spiritual advisor, but it's not
Yeah.
the government's place to
Mhm.
tell you what you can and cannot do with your body. It's the same thing with female rights, as far as their reproductive rights. That's a conversation between me as a healthcare provider and the patient. That is not the government's business.
Mhm.
That is, I have seen a large number of women that have had major complications, life-threatening emergencies because they were not able to have appropriate prenatal care or in what would wildly be known to be
Mhm.
a at-risk pregnancy before we got to the point where you had the woman almost die, had the baby die or almost die. I've been involved in those situations more times than I want to be involved in. It happens because we have allowed a system that has allowed for maternal and child mortality rates to go through the roof because government wants to uh, stick its nose into a woman's reproductive rights.
Mhm.
So it becomes the question of if I said, okay, whenever you're 50 years old or you've had 3 kids, you should have a mandatory vasectomy.
Mhm.
Okay, should that be okay? I mean, should I be able to tell you that when you turn 50, you have to have a vasectomy?
Right.
No, you'd be like, no, that's nuts, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But I mean, it's what we're doing to women. We're infringing on their reproductive health care.
Mhm. And it just seems like it's the government trying to make people comfortable with being controlled.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's special interest groups that say, hey, this is what my faith believes of when the soul enters the body or when life begins. Does life begin at conception? Does life begin at birth? So you have special interest groups that are saying this is when this happens. And so we're going to make decisions based on that
Mhm.
rather than, okay, well, maybe my beliefs don't align with your beliefs on does life begin at conception? Does life begin at birth? Does so you've got one group that says, okay, my religion, my group that I'm with says
Right.
this is when it happens, and so we should make laws based on that. But not everybody's beliefs align with that.
Mhm.
So once again, it's a conversation between a patient, their healthcare provider, and their family.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. There's just a lot of issues that we just need to sit down and talk about and really understand the other point of view because talking with both those that believe in uh, pro-choice and pro-life, there is a lot of missing communication between both the sides that they just don't understand the reason that the other side believes in something. You're going to have pro-choice people believe that the other side they just want to kill babies, but then you're going to have the or I mean pro life. You're going to have people that believe in pro life thinking that the other side just wants to kill babies, but people that believe in pro choice that the other people just want to control their reproductive rights. And I think we just need to
Yeah,
sit down and have a conversation and a discussion on why they believe what they believe and
right.
to let them know why one side believes what they believe in. I think that's just what we could do. Just sit down and talk and stop fighting so much with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were discussing before on black and white issues. Is it black and white to say pro-choice, pro-life? But there's gray areas in there. You have, okay, we have great medical technology right now that can tell early if a child is going to have some kind of genetic disorder where we know that in hours after that child's birth, they are going to not survive. They are going to suffer a horrific couple of hours before that child dies due to some genetic birth defect. Should that pregnancy be allowed to continue? Do you want to just bring that child into the world so that for 2 hours they can suffer and die? Do you a major one brought up is should you have to raise the child if you were a rape victim? I
Right.
mean, these are questions that fall into that gray area that don't fall into the black and white of pro-choice, pro-life.
Mhm.
And everybody wants to boil it down to one of those two. Is it one or the other? No, I mean, there's a lot to work with in the middle there.
Yeah. Well, listen, it was it was great having you on the podcast and having a conversation with you on these issues because I do believe that just having a conversation is important and that's what we all need.
Absolutely. No, we need to be able to open up good dialogue and be able to talk about these issues in a open environment so that we can
Mhm.
understand each other and where each other's coming from, so that we can have good discussion on this is your belief, this is what I believe, where are we meeting in the middle to actually facilitate change
Right.
and improve the lives of as many people as we can.
Yeah, and without any judgments because it just seems that like that's all we do nowadays.
No, you're 100% right on that. I mean, it's y- the way social media impacts people's thinking. It's people are going to be told,
Mhm.
Stephen Shook is running as a Democrat. He's going to try. He wants to do this, this, and this. No, I mean, just because I'm running as a Democrat doesn't mean I'm out to, kill babies and take away everybody's guns and, open the border and, I mean, that's
It's
it's
crazy.
wildly laughable that you can say, okay, he's part of this party, so he wants to do all these extreme things. No, I
Mhm.
want to get things back to the middle where most Americans live and what's
Mhm.
important to them on their daily lives. Most people don't want to think about all these major, crazy, insane issues that are being thrown at them all the time. They want
Yeah.
to know, can I afford my rent? If I get hurt, is going to the hospital going to bankrupt me?
Mhm.
Can I afford to buy my groceries? Can I get gas in my car to even be able to get to work? Should I have to be working two jobs to afford my rent and to take care of my family? These are the things that are important to people, and these are the things that we need to be focused on fixing.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been great. It's been great having this conversation with you.
Eric, no, I appreciate you having me on. It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir.